This TSN 1040 podcast is powered by Metro Ford. It's hard to beat a Metro Ford deal. In Fort Coquitlam and online at metromotors.com.
Good evening. Rob Fay is actually on the road down in Everett, calling the game tonight between the Vancouver Canadians and the Everett Aqua Sox. But Lou Filippo here with you, covering for Rob tonight. And as usual, KP Wee and Niall O'Donohoe got that one right this week.
There you go.
And we're going to take you through a couple of hours of baseball talk, and maybe we'll talk about some other stuff. Rob will be joining us in about 15 minutes down from Everett. Give us a little bit of an update on what the Vancouver Canadians are doing. Quick Major League scoreboard. Miami, that came up earlier as a topic because the C's are actually outdrawing them, but they are beating Washington tonight, 9-5 in the 6th. Texas Rangers 7-0 over Detroit. Milwaukee beating Atlanta 4-2. Minnesota goose egg over Baltimore so far in the 4th, 2-0. Jays, of course, are playing in a bit. So, first thing we're going to do here, we are now approaching the All-Star break. So when you take a look at the standings, okay, and standings is always a good place to start, unless, of course, you're the Baltimore Orioles. And we've talked about this before, where it looks like, for all intents and purposes, in the American League, the race is over. You're going to have Boston, New York. One's going to win the East. One's going to get a wild card. Cleveland has now opened up an 11.5 game lead. No one's catching them. And really, I mean, Houston and Seattle in the West. Now, Seattle just kind of, they fall back a few games and then they just keep coming back like the coyote for more punishment. But they're only a game and a half back now. Is it fair to say those are going to be your 5 American League playoff teams?
Well, maybe don't sleep on Oakland quite yet. Oakland, yes, they are 7 games back of Seattle right now, but Oakland's just been hanging around there all year. I mean, they're 48-39, and they are playing much better than I think anybody had expected. And Franklin Barreto now in his 3rd crack at it with the A's, a former Vancouver Canadian. He's starting to find his stride, and looks like he might be a big time contributor as the A's make a drive for the postseason. Yeah, I mean, with Seattle, they got through that gauntlet of the New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox. Now, it didn't go all that well when they hit the road against those two teams, but they're still in pretty good shape. But Houston, I don't think they're going to fade away anytime soon. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens come trade deadline time. But, Lou, I have to agree. I think right now, I think your 5 teams already set. And we're just past the 4th of July when we're saying this.
I'm still not sure about Seattle. But, I mean, the one team that I keep coming back to is the Angels. I was going to say Anaheim Angels, but sorry, the LA Angels.
I think you should still call them the Anaheim Angels. I've never gone for this Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim stuff.
Is 12.5 too much?
I mean, that seems like a significant amount of a significant deficit. But again, you're talking about, a couple of things. I think at least a couple of us sitting at this table here are thinking that the Mariners might not sustain this kind of pace that they've been on. And I'm looking at Lou. And the other thing is the Angels with Mike Trout, Pujols, that team could go on a run. You just never know. I mean, that is a big deficit. And, if the Angels are going to do anything, they've got to start playing well. They've got to start winning. Yes, I know at this point we're approaching the All-Star break. Things don't look very good, but I'm still not sold yet on Seattle. So, I mean, the other 4 teams, no-brainer, but that 5th team, I'm not so sure yet.
I mean, I'm certainly not sold on Seattle, but they're getting to the point now where they're putting so much space.
But guys, they're 23 games above 500. What more do you need? What more do you need?
Like, they could literally go into a major slump and still win 90 games, which will get them in.
Right.
Oakland's not winning 90 games, and unless I know Anaheim's getting Ohtani back, but I'm sorry, where they are now, they're not winning 90 games, and that's kind of, I know we discussed it before, where we're at the point now, and this is very rare for Major League Baseball, and it only really deals with the American League. It's over, and it's the first week of July, and it's over.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. I know Rob has brought it up. Maybe there should be, just like the Northwest League, you have first half playoffs, second half playoffs. And I think this year, especially in the American League, it'd be actually perfect for that kind of format.
Well, I do have a question. When was the last time we've seen this, at all in Major League Baseball, where it looked like, at the All-Star break or just prior to the All-Star break, every divisional race has been settled, or quote unquote, like it looks like it's going to turn out this way. I remember 95, for example, that one year where the Red Sox was running away with the division in the East. The Cleveland Indians they were the best team in the Central and in all of baseball, and the Angels had like a huge lead in the West over Texas and Seattle. That was the one year I remember where it looked like, in August, every division was locked up, and then we had the Angels that year choking and collapsing and letting Seattle.
That's right.
But strange things have happened before. I'm just not sold on the Mariners this year.
That's when we're talking about divisions. We're not talking about divisions. We're talking about divisions and the wild card.
That's right. Yes.
The wild card, to Major League Baseball's benefit, they've had a bunch of play-in games, and then you've got the wild card teams. That's not happening this year because it's 5 teams that have run away. And yeah, Oakland is the next team with a shot, in terms of being close. They're 7 games back. 7 games is a lot to make up, especially when, let's be frank here, their talent is mediocre. Yes, they're 9 games over 500. Their plus-minus run ratio suggests they should be about 2 games over 500 or 3 games. And like we said, Houston, no one's catching them.
Nope.
American League East, forget about it.
Exactly.
Forget about it. Those 2 teams are both making the playoffs. We could have 4 teams in the American League win 100 games. That is unheard of. Absolutely unheard of.
Well, and I think this goes to the fact you have so many teams tanking. The White Sox, we kind of knew they were going to tank. Baltimore, yeah, we thought they were not going to be great, but they've been putrid. Kansas City, looks like they might very well get the number 1 pick in the 2019 draft, considering 4 years earlier they won the World Series. So, I think, this is why you're kind of seeing the super teams, but you're also seeing the super bad teams in between, like with the White Sox and the Orioles. Tigers were doing okay until that 11-game losing streak, which they did snap against the Blue Jays. But I think that's that's why you're seeing all these really good teams in the American League, because there are teams trying to go the other way, and this is where you have the Cubs and the Astros. This is where teams are trying to follow the example. The Cubs were so bad a few years ago, and so were the Astros, and they wind up winning World Series titles because of it.
Now, speaking of the Cubs, they waited a while, but they now seem to be making their move. They're only a game back of Milwaukee, and I think it's fair to say that, no one really looked at Milwaukee as being a true contender, and the Cubs are going to be one of those teams that are going to be there. They're there. They're there. They're going to win that division.
I think with Milwaukee, I honestly thought, you always hear about these teams. Oh, they won the offseason. They got Lorenzo Cain. They got Yelich from Miami, and they made all these nice moves. But usually when you see teams that win the offseason, like, say, the Blue Jays 2 years ago, it didn't quite go so well. And Milwaukee had such a good year last year. I thought maybe they were due for a step back, but they're still hanging in there. I'm still expecting the Cubs to pull away when it's all said and done, but Milwaukee's certainly hanging in there. St. Louis, you can never count them out. They're always there.
Now, I know that at the end of the day, you still have to play a 7-game series, and anything can happen. But KP, when you look at the National League, is there any team there that you think can challenge Houston, New York, Boston? Sorry, Cleveland and Seattle fans. It's going to be either New York, Houston, or Boston in the World Series.
Lou, if you asked me this question back, in the first couple of weeks of the season, or even in late April, I would have said the Arizona Diamondbacks, because it looked like at that point they were running away. At that point, if you asked me that question, they were winning every series. They were they had a big lead in the National League West. Looked like they were going to run away with that division. But a couple months into the season, now we're approaching the All-Star break. They're kind of like the middle of the pack kind of team. So if you'd asked me back then, I would have said that team. But now, I guess you still can't count out the Dodgers. I mean, they've been a streaky team. If Kershaw is right, and we know all about his postseason struggles, is he gonna break out this year? Who knows? But if there's any one team that you would look at in the National League, the Dodgers, preseason favorites, one of them anyway to make it to the World Series, and if they do. If the pitching staff can, do the job, not implode like in last year's World Series, they would be able to give the American League team, whoever it might be, a challenge in the World Series if they get that far.
Anyone that you see there being a challenge now?
No, I actually agree with KP about the Dodgers. I think that's the team, for me, that I'm paying attention to as far as the National League West goes. The Dodgers, they have that playoff experience. They've gone through the grinder, and, I still don't know how they did not win the World Series. They definitely had their chances to wrap that thing up in less than 7 games, and they didn't. Of course, Brandon Morrow ran out of gas because Dave Roberts wanted to keep on pitching him until his arm fell off, and eventually that came back to bite them. They easily could have won Game 5 in Houston, and knowing that they won Game 6 in Los Angeles, they very well could have gone the Dodgers' way. I think the Dodgers are definitely the team to look out for. Arizona, they got off to a great start, but they've been very middling. But you remember the Dodgers, like when we were first on with this season, the Dodgers looked like they were dead and buried. But they have just turned it on big time. And, considering they're doing this without Corey Seager, who's out for the year. So, to me, I think that's the team to look out for is the Dodgers.
Well, the one other team that we want to look at is the Nationals, who are suddenly under 500.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. You just don't expect. And again, a team with all that talent, with the superstars that they have, with Bryce Harper leading the way, you just don't expect them to be where they're at right now, under 500. They had a players only meeting yesterday.
The dreaded players only.
Yes.
So,
yes.
I mean, are they gonna turn things around after that? Who knows? But if they do manage to win that division in the East, and get into the playoffs, who knows? In a 5-game series and a 7-game series, if they somehow get to the World Series as well, they would be a fun team to watch and see how they manage in that kind of a pressure situation.
Now, weren't they supposed to be better after Daniel Murphy came back off the DL? Actually, they've gotten a lot worse. I think they've played like 10 games below 500 since he's come back to the Nationals. So, you know what? I mean, they're a game below, but 7 games, it's not insurmountable. There's still half a season to go, and a lot can happen. But, I still don't know how Philadelphia's kind of still doing it, but they are. Atlanta, Alex Anthopoulos, he's working his pixie dust again, like 2015. So, I wouldn't quite be ready to put last rites in Washington just yet.
I mean, the two teams I look at, the one if I was an American League team that would scare me, is just because their pitching would be Washington, assuming they put it all together. So far, they're nowhere close to doing that. I mean, a lot of people will look at the Cubs and say, hey, they're hot. I don't think they have a rotation to stack up against Boston, New York, or Houston. The one team that I think could put a jolt into these teams and frighten them because, one, they have pitching and they have the experience, is, of course, the San Francisco Giants. Baumgartner's back. They have Johnny Cueto. And somehow, some way, these guys have shown on 3 other occasions that they find a way to get it done in the postseason. They've got the best catcher in baseball in terms of all-around catcher in Buster Posey. Don't forget, they went out and they got Evan Longoria, a guy who's hungry for it. If these guys can squeeze in, now they may flame out like they did a couple of years ago, but if they get something rolling, they can go into a series with one of these American League teams and say, okay, my ace can match your ace can match my ace, and now we're into Game 3, and you're looking at Garrett Cole as your number 3 guy in Houston or something like that. So that's the team that if I'm an American League team, I'm keeping my eye on and saying, I really don't want those guys to make it. And that's really the only team in the National League that would scare me if I'm New York, Boston, or Houston. And
Or
that's just a marginal scare.
Or just ask the Kansas City Royals 2014.
Exactly.
I mean, really, Bumgarner was the reason the Giants won.
Yeah, no, they've found a different way to do it each time they've won it. And like I said, they've won 3 of them. They used to do the even year thing, and then they gave that up for a bit. But they have gone all in with their offseason moves, and they're hanging around. Now, once again, their metrics are terrible. But all you have to do in the National League is get there. American League's totally different story because you got those monster powerhouse teams up top.
And this is an even numbered year, 2018.
It's an even numbered year. We're going to go to the break here in just a minute, and we'll leave you with this question. Let's say it's the Dodgers and the Red Sox. Kershaw versus Price. Does any team win? You're listening to Vancouver Canadians Baseball on the home of the Canadians, TSN 1040. Well, Rob Fay is not in the studio tonight. He's down in Everett getting ready to call a Vancouver Canadians baseball game. And you can catch Rob and the Canadians right here on TSN 1040 tomorrow night, once again at Everett. And then once again Sunday, nooner at the Nat versus Spokane. And Monday night as well. Now, fortunately, though, with technology, we do have Rob available to chat with us. Rob, down in Everett, how is everything down there?
It's good. Canadians looking to snap a 2-game losing streak, so hopefully tonight's the night to do it. They're playing a team in the Everett Aqua Sox that have gotten the best of them all 4 meetings. So, yeah, the Canadians had to deal with the 4th of July down here, nearly 5,000 fans cramming Memorial Stadium. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of pomp, a lot of circumstance, and the Canadians lose yet another 1-run baseball game.
Now, once again, the Seas have managed to hang in there, and it is Everett that they're chasing. They got a couple more cracks at them before the end of the first half. What do they need to do to really kind of make up those games? Because the time is running out in the first half.
Well, I think front and center, Lou, they got to win the next 2 games. If they can win tonight and win tomorrow and come back to Vancouver just 2 games back, then you've still got 2.5 weeks of really an opportunity where you'll play Boise, you'll play Tri-City, teams that I think they match up pretty well against. But Everett's just always got one more base hit or one more arm out of the bullpen. And last night I was looking for some of the bigger names to step up, the Griffin Conines of the world, the Jake Bros of the world, and just didn't get it. So, even though the draft guys are now in, and this is probably a majority of the team that we're going to see moving forward, still, Canadians a couple of pieces away from truly, in my estimation, being called a contender.
Hey, Rob, it's Niall. Just wanted to get your thoughts on Tanner Kerr. He had a huge night last night, getting 3 hits, including his first pro home run. He's been the one guy who's been really stepping it up as of late.
Yeah, now the thing that I like about him is it doesn't matter if you're up by 10, if it's a tie game, if you're down by 10, he plays with the same tenacity, and I think that's something that the Blue Jays organization is starting to acknowledge. I've been a fly on the wall after the game every once in a while waiting for a ride back to the hotel to hear Dallas McPherson's report back to the Blue Jays. A lot of people don't realize you can go 0 for 4 and yet get an A on your report card when Dallas calls back to Toronto and basically files a report and says, listen, even though this guy was 0 for 4, he hit the ball right on the screws all 4 times. And that's essentially what these players are hoping to do. And he's locked in right now. The last couple of games, like you said, he's hit the ball right on the button. Sometimes he gets the result, sometimes he doesn't. That's baseball. But I got to think that the Blue Jays, even though he's not really a blue chip prospect, is at least starting to become a part of the radar.
Hey, Rob, this is KP here. Nice to chat with you. Rob, just talking about, you're just talking about the offense or offensive players, positional players. What about on the pitching side? I believe the Canadians are number 1 in pitching in the Northwest League. Who has stood out so far this season?
I think the bullpen's been outstanding. And unfortunately, you look at this team and you say to yourself, well, what about the rotation? The rotation's hit and miss. I mean, I look at Randy Pondler, a guy that in his first 2 starts was pretty good. He's gotten rocked in his last 2 outings. Jose Espada is 0-3 with an ERA in the mid-6s. I mean, these are guys in the rotation that you're hoping can get you some victories, especially Jose Espada, who was in Vancouver last year. So from that perspective, I'm a little disappointed in his inability to, A, get a win, but more importantly, keep the ball in the strike zone. Where I like this Canadians pitching staff, it's got to be the back end of the bullpen. I mean, if they've got a win or an opportunity to win, they've been pretty good at doing it. Very rarely have you seen their bullpen implode. So for me right now, now, I just say the rotation's got to pick up the slack, because in the first, week and a half of the season, they were the story. Now, all of a sudden, the offense needs them to come up, and they got to pull their pants up right now. I just don't see it. The Canadians, the way that they're losing right now is probably the hardest part for me. They fought Salem Kaiser hard for 5 games, but now to see them go right back to their old habits in Everett last night, that was a little disenchanting for me.
Rob, a lot of these guys now, they're starting to hit that 60, 50 at-bat range. Is there a guy that you've seen he's like hitting the ball on the screws, and he's just not getting any luck, and you're thinking, okay, if a couple drop in, look out, he's busting?
Yeah, I thought that guy would be McGregory Contreras, but unfortunately he's starting to strike out a little too much, and I don't know if he's trying. It's funny, it's a great question, Lou, because the reality is that sometimes you'll hit the ball right on the button and get nothing for your efforts, and then all of a sudden you try to overthink it and start swinging at pitches that you don't normally swing because you're looking for that elusive base hit. Contreras is probably a guy that you can put in that conversation. Vincent Capra at the top of the order is a guy that I still think has one more gear. He's starting to dial up. And, Nick Podcool, who hasn't played for the last couple of days for the Vancouver Canadians, when he gets back in, he's going to try to stop being snake bitten a little bit. He got off to a great start for the Canadians right out of the shoot down in Eugene, but receded a little bit. So there's a lot of guys that are right on the cusp, and if they can just start to synchronize their abilities and get some breaks, this Canadian team could go on a run real quick.
Okay, Rob, I believe you've mentioned this stat a few times. This is really crunch time now for the C's. Now, I believe you've always said if a team goes 5 games off the pace at any point in the season, they are not going to win that division title. So really, this is a must-win game, you have to say, for the C's here tonight and also tomorrow as well. But
there's no doubt.
Well, but what I'm going to ask you is, why should C's fans be optimistic that, they can still pull out this series?
Well, the optimism comes in the fact that they're playing the team that they're chasing. So if they can get a win tonight, get a win tomorrow, they wake up coming back to Vancouver for a 3-game series against another team that they're right in the mix with the destiny in their own hands. And that, for me, is all you can ask. You don't want to have to look at the out-of-town scoreboard and hope that Hillsborough or Eugene can help you out. You want to take on those teams right here, front and center. Jordan Barrett gets the ball tonight for the Canadians. He might be, of the 6 guys in the rotation, for me, the most dominant of the 6. So I like where the Canadians are right now. Who knows? Maybe they win by 10, maybe they lose by 10. But at least they should be competitive tonight. So for me, Niall, again, 5 mathematically is a tried, tested, and true number of a team that goes 5 or beyond cannot come back and win a half, because you got to remember, this is a sprint. And if the Canadians lose tonight, they've got 17 games to make up 5, and that just doesn't happen very often in the Northwest League. So, to me, it's a must-win tonight, it's a must-win tomorrow, and only then can you start to say that you're in the conversation. They lose this one tonight, they're already looking at the second half.
Rob, this is KP again. I just want to go back a little bit and talk about Vinny Capra, whom you mentioned just a moment ago. We look at the box scores. We see guys get so many hits, guys go so many innings, get so many strikeouts. But it's things that guys do defensively that is underappreciated or doesn't show up in the box score. Talk to me about Vinny Capra and the job he's done on the field so far at shortstop.
There are 2 positions when you get drafted that I've always thought are the hardest to make the transition from the college game to the pro game: catching and middle infielder. And the reason that I think that Vinny Capra has been a real asset to the Canadians is, like you said, KP, his defense has been great. He's got great east-west movement, which means he can cover a lot of territory in the middle of the infield. He's worked with 4 different second basemen already this season. Think about that. Do the math on that. He's only played in 16 games, and he's had to deal with 4 new dance partners over the course of the first 3 weeks of the season. I think that's extraordinary, because you wouldn't have known that these guys are just getting to know each other the way that Capra's played. But when I look at that middle infield for the Canadians right now, that's a cause for concern. You've got everybody from Brandon Polizzi, who's a right fielder, who's transitioned to second base to, fill in, if you will. You've got Otto Lopez, who dislocated his finger and then had it pop back in the same game. It's just so much mix and match right now. And I think that's a part of the minor league baseball experience, though, is you just got to dance with the girl who brought you. But on the flip side of that, for Vinny Capra to have that many people already this season and not show any warts is really a feather in his cap.
Hey, Rob, we're going to let you go here because I know you got a game to call in a couple of minutes. Now, we're going to start moving on here and talking about, obviously, obviously trade talk, which is a constant thing. J.A. Happ is now being rumored to Seattle. You've had the chance now to see this Everett team 4 or 5 games. Is there someone that you've seen where you say, okay, we want to get that guy?
They've got about 3 guys that I would take a look at right now. They got a guy named Bobby Honeyman, who, if you threw him into a deal, a third baseman, I know that the Blue Jays have their heir apparent for the next 10 years at third base already covered up. But, of course, even if you play third, who's not to know? He's a tall, he's a prototypical third baseman and middle infielder. He's got that 6'2", 6'3" frame, tall, lanky. I'm sure that the Mariners like him, and I don't know if they'd covet him in a part of a deal like that. But you got to remember, J. Happ is one of those guys that I don't know how much he's going to get you in a return. I mean, the reality is I don't think you're going to get major leaguer for major leaguer. I don't know what prospect you would give for J. Happ, and I just think that the Blue Jays would be crazy to let him go because of how uncertain the rest of the rotation is. I mean, you trade J. Happ to anybody, and you're throwing in the white towel on the 2018 season. And for a ticket buyer, for Rogers Communications to all of a sudden see that they've got 12,000, 13,000 in-house, that is a very, very causing concern for me if I'm a Blue Jay fan. If you've taken the one guy and traded him out the door and you're left with a bunch of broken toys on the floor, for me, that screams rebuild. And if I'm a Blue Jay fan, I don't know if I'm quite ready for that yet.
Well, Rob, thanks a lot for giving us a little bit of time before you get ready to call that game. And if fans want to check it out, where can they hear you tonight?
We will be at CanadiansBaseball.com, and please tell KP that they have awesome guacamole down here.
No.
Food for thought. There you go, guys. Thanks for filling in for me, and I'll see you guys in a couple of days.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Rob Fay calling from Everett Municipal Stadium, which, if you've had the chance to go down there, is one of the quirkiest little stadiums around, which makes it charming. And one of the neat things they have there is if you go down the, I guess it'd be the left field line.
That's right.
Then you go across the street. They got a little plaque there on the sidewalk of where Ken Griffey hit his first professional home run.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, you go on the Google Earth, you can actually see that plaque.
And I'll tell you where else you can find it as well. I was actually in Everett when I went to see a couple of Mariners games earlier in the season, and I just wanted to, I've gone to one game there before back in 2014, and I definitely would love to go back again. But if you do go on cplusbaseball.ca, I actually have some pictures posted up, and I actually have a picture of the plaque, and I also have where you can find it is basically like right across the street from the left field foul pole, and that's where you can find it. But
right
it's pretty cool. It says he hit it off Gil Heredia. So former Montreal Expo.
Yeah. So we're talking about that, and then Rob was mentioning about J.A. Happ. I don't want to say he sounds like he's untouchable, but
pretty darn close.
Pretty close. Well, but the problem here is, and we've seen this with other teams, right? He may be the only guy that's got value right now because Estrada's down, Donaldson down, Tulowitzki down. Not that you could trade him anyway. And now you start talking about other guys. I mean, he could bring you something, as opposed to really what they're left with is a bunch of guys that will bring you nothing.
Yeah. The Jays have also, they've picked up a couple of guys for their AAA team in Buffalo in Zach Stewart, who was the one-time hotshot prospect that they got from the Cincinnati Reds in the Scott Rowland deal, and some throw-in by the name of Edwin Encarnacion. I think that worked out pretty well for the Jays, but Zach Stewart and Brandon Compton was the other pitcher joining the herd.
Oh, you never know what you're going to get when you are trading for minor leaguers. And just some foreshadowing here, we will be giving some tickets away in the second hour.
Very nice.
And it's going to involve a fellow who was traded. And when he was traded, he was batting .212. Well, you know what? It turned out pretty well for the team that obtained him. But we'll save that for the second hour. You are listening to Vancouver Canadians Gameday. Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice here on TSN 1040. Welcome back to Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice. Lou Filippo sitting in for Rob Fay down in Everett, Washington, just north of Seattle, getting ready to call a game. We're talking about the whole first half, second half of the season. And in minor league baseball, really the only way that you kind of make those changes, guys getting called up and called down. Of course, in the majors, you sign free agents. There's big ones, there's little ones, big deals, small deals. Some work out, some don't. But we're halfway through the season now, and usually, they always say you have to build the team from within. But for some reason this year, there's a lot of guys that are making a difference who were signed as free agents. Obvious ones, J.D. Martinez, maybe not a free agent, but an offseason move.
That's right.
Garrett Cole in Houston, Giancarlo Stanton in New York. And then there's some ones that haven't worked out quite as well, like, say, Yu Darvish. But is there a move that, now is there a move that stands out to you that, when it happened, it was really kind of an under-the-radar move, but you know what? It's really worked out for the team.
I would probably say the Mariners getting D. Gordon. I think that has really turned out well, and considering they started him in center field and was actually making pretty good strides there, but now he's back at second base, filling in for Robinson Cano, as Cano will be out for a little while longer before he comes back. But Cano, should the Mariners make the postseason, it looks like they will, as you look at the standings today. But yeah, I think D. Gordon, he's really added just another element of speed to that lineup, joining Gene Sakura for a very potent top of the order for the Mariners. So, yeah, if I had to look at one move right there, definitely D. Gordon would be one for me.
KP?
There are a couple that come to mind, one being Matt Kemp going back to the Dodgers from the Braves. That deal kind of was under the radar a little bit, I thought, because Kemp, we thought that his big seasons, were
distant. Was washed up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a distant memory. And this year, there's talk of him, being an all-star. He's been hitting well the last couple of weeks or so. So that's one that has that was kind of went under the radar a little bit. The other one was Jake Arrieta. I thought he was not signed until late. And the Phillies, that was kind of not the team I expected him to sign with. But give Philadelphia credit, they're still. Well, they've been competitive this season in the National League East, and was surprised at the time that Arrieta would sign with would go to the Phillies, and they've been a very pretty good team so far, doing better than most of us have expected.
For me, it's kind of interesting because I look at all these big moves that were made. I mean, there are a lot of big bats that moved around. And really, there was some pitching that moved around, but usually it's pitching that grabs the headlines. Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, the Yu Darvish signing was huge. It just didn't work out.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet. And I mentioned it earlier, but the Garrett Cole deal for Houston, to me, it's like Golden State going out and signing Boogie Cousins. It's like, okay, we got a bunch of Cy Young caliber pitchers. Let's go get another one. And they really didn't pay a lot for him.
No.
And when you take those three guys put together, you can really have a really, really good discussion over, who's actually the ace of that team. Is it today? It might be Verlander. Tomorrow it might be Cole. End of the season it might be Keuchel. I mean, that's disgusting.
And Charlie Morton, I mean, he's kind of a forgotten man in that rotation as well. So, I mean, yeah, they are pretty loaded. And, another pretty good offseason move that's paid off for Milwaukee so far has been Lorenzo Cain. He's been another nice pick. I mean, he's been a big reason why the Brewers find themselves in first place in the National League Central. You kind of wonder about these deals, though, that, the back half of those long deals that eventually it's going to start to hurt these teams. But for right now, Lorenzo Cain's been outstanding.
We were talking about San Francisco earlier, and they made a couple of big splashes, and they still haven't paid off yet. But, I mean, let's face it, and Evan Longoria and Andrew McCutchen, those are two pretty big name players, former National League MVP and a guy who was always in the running in the American League. If these guys can suddenly turn it on, look out. I mean, these guys can play.
Absolutely, and these two are veterans. Even if they go into a slump, they're not going to be phased. They're going to work hard, continue to battle, continue to grind out at bats, and I would think that they would be setting good examples for the other players, younger players on the team. And that veteran presence is maybe a little bit again underappreciated, but it does make a difference, I think.
Now let's take away Yu Darvish for a second, because right now he is in a class of his own of a move that did not work out. Is there anything else out there where, the move happened and you were like, okay, I really like that. This is going to work out really, really well, and did not?
I actually thought Darvish was going to work out for the Cubs.
I thought it was a great sign.
Given what happened in Game 7 of the World Series and all that, but with the Cubs, let's face it, Wrigley Field's not exactly a pitcher's park at the best of times. The friendly confines sometimes really not very friendly to pitchers, whether you're home or away. I thought that was a move that I thought was really going to work out. I think Colorado really trying to beef up their bullpen. I don't know if that's really worked out super well. I mean, Wade Davis, he's had his moments, but he's also had some inconsistency too. I mean, the Rockies just blew a wad of money on their bullpen, and they are kind of on the periphery still of the National League West race. So maybe those are some moves that I thought, I mean, the Royals kind of set the template, really. I mean, when they had that dominant bullpen with Herrera, they had Davis. I think Danny Duffy was part of that bullpen too before he started to join the rotation. One move that's kind of worked out okay, even though he had a little trouble putting his pants on. One move I did not think was going to work out that well was Brandon Morrow. I thought, after, I mentioned earlier, Dave Roberts basically wore him out in the World Series, basically pitched every game, the first to do so since Darryl Knowles back in 1973. He was doing very well until the time of his injury, of course. If you hadn't heard, he hurt himself, back injury, trying to put on his pants. Yep. And you know what? Those weird injuries, they always seem to happen in baseball.
They always happen in baseball. There was one move that I actually thought was going to work out fairly well, and it's been pretty much collapsed. I thought Todd Frazier was actually a good signing for the Mets. Not a lot. And here's a guy who had the potential to kind of turn it around. And one move that I honestly thought was not going to work, and so far it's working really, really well, was J.D. Martinez. I was just not sold on him, and I just figured, you put him in that big market, like a Boston, and if it doesn't start off well, he's going to melt away. Well, it didn't start off well for him, but man, oh man, he is putting it up now, and maybe Scott Boras was right. This guy is a bargain.
Well, that's the one guy, too, that I thought would kind of struggle. We've seen guys that go to Boston. The first year they struggle.
Yeah. David Price
comes to mind, obviously. But I did not expect that J.D. Drew would be doing so on Boston, like hitting 327 with 26 home runs, 71 RBIs. I did not see that happening. I truly thought he was going to struggle. Big market, tons of expectations, the media. You've seen great players, struggle in big markets like this, like Boston and New York. But, his performance in the first half of the season has blown me away.
I mean, you look at Stanton. Stanton got off to awful start.
Oh, the fans were on him immediately.
But he now seems to be finding his groove, and if he finds his groove and Sanchez learns to hit over 200 again, still got the power, just not getting any hits, that team is going to be absolutely frightening.
Well, one move that I'm surprised what Jay Bruce with the New York Mets. I was really surprised anybody would actually. I mean, yes, he did have a bounce back season with Cleveland, but you look at the defensive metric. He's not very good in the outfield. I mean, if you go on some Blue Jays message boards when Jay Bruce was the rumor du jour, it seemed like for the last 2 years,
for a long time, everybody
was saying, "Oh my God, we don't want this guy because he could fall off a cliff any moment. He's not good with the glove as it is." And he's really struggled with the Mets. I was really surprised he did very well with Cleveland, and good for him for cashing in on that free agent deal, returning to the Mets. But that to me was a signing that I'm not surprised is not working out so far.
So now let's turn to the Blue Jays. They made a lot of offseason moves. Give me one that worked, one that didn't.
I'd have to say Curtis Granderson has worked out. I think. He's kind of tailed off a little bit lately, but I think he's been a good clubhouse presence for that team and good veteran leadership, and he's definitely a fan favorite, and I think that was kind of expected. As far as moves that didn't work out, Oh, man. I mean, where do you begin?
Where do you begin?
Where do you begin, really?
Some of the moves they didn't make did not work out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was gonna say Granderson as well being a smart move or a good move because the guy has played in New York with the Mets and in LA with the Dodgers, so he's played in big markets. He's a veteran, good clubhouse guy, can hit the occasional home run, maybe low batting average, but again he brings some kind of experience, leadership, a veteran kind of guy that you want on your team off the bench. I thought that was a good move, and I think he's tailed out a little bit, but that's a good pickup by the Blue Jays.
I think one player. I think one player to me that if you'd asked us back in April, a move that hasn't been working out, Randall Grichuk, but he had a great month of June, even though still his overall stats are not very good as far as batting average goes. But he's been tremendous defensively. Had a great month of June, and I think the jury still might be out on that one. But if you had to look at a move that hasn't quite worked out, maybe the way you would have liked it to, maybe it would be Grichuk and maybe Aledmus Diaz. Maybe that's another move. He's had his moments, but he's also had his bad moments too. So
I'm going to go off the track here. I think the best move they made was not re-signing Jose Bautista, and I think the worst move they made was not trading Josh Donaldson. But that's just me. That's just me. Yeah. You are listening to the Vancouver Canadians Game Day on the home of the Canadians, TSN 1040. We're just a week away from the Major League All-Star Game, and you would think with the Mariners doing as well as they're doing that they would have a few guys who are, say, in the voting on the All-Star list, and they draw well, so you would imagine that they'd have guys who are there. They've got some guys who are squeaking around, but really they're nowhere to be found. And this kind of brings us to this segment here. And we're going to talk about the All-Star voting. Like I said, it's a week left, but not for the voting. The voting will end over the weekend, and then, of course, you'll have your what they've been doing now.
The final vote.
The final vote, right? Which is always more exciting than the actual voting nowadays. And I look at where the standings are now, and you know what? Major League Baseball fans, you guys should actually give yourselves a hand, because for the most part, you finally got it right. Like, you can just think of all the years when, the ballot stuffing, and you had guys there who had no business being all-stars, but it's pretty good right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just, I think fans are just more educated. Of course, the internet is a big reason for that. I mean, people are able to follow their teams. Of course, MLB.TV, you can basically watch any single game you'd like to watch. Minor league TV as well. I think it's just, fans are just more educated, and they're more savvy. Of course, there's more stats than ever before to measure exactly how a player is doing. So, maybe it shouldn't be all that surprising. I think people are just more savvy these days when it comes to following baseball.
Right. And I remember when, I was growing up as a kid, you have Sandy Alomar, always injured, not being, just playing like 20 or so games the first half, and he's the leading vote getter at catcher in the American League. So you're thinking, like, what is going on with the voting? But as now alluded to, fans are more educated because of the internet, all these extra stats. And, it's great that, this year, as you're saying, Lou, that the fans seem to be getting it right this time around.
Yeah, I think part of it is the fan might be a little bit smarter, but of course, internet voting. Back in the day, you had to go to the ballpark and they pass out the old ballot in the seat.
That's right.
Bam, bam, bam. Mm-hmm. You hit your card, and hopefully you don't have any hanging chads. Yeah. But you actually got cards handed out to you.
Yeah, that's right. You punch in the holes if you had a pen or a pencil, and made it easier.
So the numbers used to be a lot smaller. Now, of course, MLB.com, you can vote online.
Up to 25 times, I believe. So.
Yeah, something kind of silly. And like I said, for the most part, they've gotten it right. We'll quickly run through some of these, but right now, catcher, it's Wilson Ramos of the Rays, Sanchez is second. I got no argument there. You could make a mild argument for Sanchez, but unless you have to hit the Mendoza line before you can be an all-star. He's got the power numbers. He's batting the .190.
Yeah.
So no complaints there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. First base. Now, we spoke about this off air. What has happened to American League first baseman? Jose Abreu is leading the voting, and you know what? I have no argument with that, which is stunning when you consider first base used to be a position where you had big boppers, big hitters, and right now in the American League, it's just not very good at all.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, just go back to my experience, like, growing up, you had, like, you know, back in the day, you had Cecil Fielder, you had Frank Thomas, all these guys, and you know Jim Thome, and you have the guys where, the one guy's gonna be is going to be deserving, but is going to be left off the All-Star team because there are 5, 6 deserving first basemen. It seems like every year that are big hitters that you just expect to be All-Stars. But this year, Jose Abreu, I would say yes, but it's just not a good season for the other first basemen in the American League, and that's just something that it's kind of bizarre. Just you don't expect this. You don't expect to see this because first base is the traditional, or one of the traditional,
power positions.
Yeah, power hitting positions, and I'm just stunned.
I mean, you know how many All-Star teams Carlos Delgado made? Two.
Right.
Yeah. And the guy was a monster masher. Nowadays,
exactly,
I mean, like, really, you could make a pretty good argument for Justin Smoke right now, too. I mean, he's nowhere to be seen on that list, but you can make a good argument.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, we'll move along to the infield. Second base, okay. Open shut, Altuve, no complaints, no arguments.
Nope.
No.
Third base, Ramirez of the Indians, having an excellent year. You might be able to say, okay, if Seager had stayed healthy, you know, and Bregman is having a great year too.
Yes.
But once again, that's pretty good. Shortstop, Manny Machado, Correa, Lindor. I have a bit of a problem here. I think based on performance, Lindor should be first, but you can't argue about Machado being first, except he's a third baseman. But that's for another day.
Yeah.
You know,
it's going to be interesting. Will Machado still be a Baltimore Oriole?
Probably not.
He might very well be in a different uniform by the time the All-Star game rolls around.
In a different league.
Yes, and a different league as well. So, hard to say.
Top 3 outfielders, Betts, Trout, Judge.
No, I can't. Really can't quibble.
No argument there.
Like I said, and designated hitter, you've got Martinez first and Stanton second, even though Martinez and Stanton both play a little bit of outfield. But once again, you know what? Stanton was the big name. Martinez is having the better year. Fans did a good job. You know, go to the National League. This is where there's maybe a couple more favorites playing in. Although, you know, Buster Posey, can't argue with him. There are a couple of other guys who are having really, really good years.
Yeah.
But once again, no argument there. First base, Freddie Freeman. Good old kind of sort of the Canadian guy.
Yeah, that's right.
But once again, great year, no arguments. Rizzo is second there, who's probably having a slightly better year, but you know, nothing serious there. Second base, you know, Ozzie Albies from the Braves. Once again, in the National League, if you're having one of those seasons that no one expected, you're being rewarded.
He's kind of the Jose Altuve light, really. You know, not the biggest guy in the world, but you know, just good player, good heady player, and just he can hit.
You know, but this is kind of talking before, like the Mariners have very little representation. The highest fellow they have in the ballot right now is, it is D. Gordon, who's third at second base. But, I mean, no one's catching Altuve.
No.
But that's one guy on a team that has 55 wins that's in the top 5, okay? And here you've got the Braves, okay? They've got 49 wins, I believe. They've got 2 guys who are actually leading the voting. Where are you, Mariner fans? Where are you, Mariner fans? You know,
well, who knows? Maybe there might be a late push at the ballot box, and you know, I mean, the deadline is winding down. So in the next few hours or so, I believe it is. So who knows? Maybe there might be a late push.
You know, and even in the outfield, Marquesas is leading the vote, getting in the outfield with Matt Kemp and Bryce Harper. Now, if in April we had sat here and said Nick Marquesas and Matt Kemp are going to be voted onto the All-Star team, what would you have said? And both of them have more votes than Bryce Harper.
Yeah.
I thought you're crazy.
Yeah.
Matt Kemp.
I know what Rob would always say is they would question your sobriety.
They would say, yes, exactly.
Yes.
And that's definitely true in that case. So those are the position players. Like we said, the fans have done a pretty good job.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the
What
pitchers.
about third base?
Third base is Arendano.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no question there. I mean, Chris Bryant, those two guys are going to be trading for the next 10 years or as long as they're in the National League.
Yeah.
But it's the managers who have to pick the pitchers.
That's right.
Right? And then once again, it's and the reserves. So if you were going to name your a four-man rotation in the American League, just for the sake of argument, 4 starters in the American now.
Wow. I got to go with Jay Happ. I got to say him. That's pretty much it for the Blue Jays. Yeah, I mean,
funny. That's what the broadcaster says.
Maybe I guess you have to go with maybe the Houston trio there. You got Garrett Cole, you got Verlander, and and as I said, I mentioned Charlie Morton, Dallas Keuchel. I mean, those guys would have to be candidates as well. Corey Kluber. I mean, you have to find room for Kluber. I think he's amazing.
I mean, the 3 guys in Houston might get pinched out by the fact that there's 3 guys.
Yeah, exactly. And every team has to be represented. Yeah. So, I mean, so somebody from the Astros. Well, but keep in mind though that AJ Hinch will be managing the American League team. So you know what, he's going to pick his guys. I am sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, everybody criticized Cito Gaston for doing it back in 1993, but you know what? They won the World Series that year, and I think the biggest controversial selection was Devon White. And you know what? He had a great game, and so you know what?
That actually
it's rough for the other teams, but you know what? If you don't like it, then maybe your team, go win a World Series. Exactly.
Okay, KP, you've heard Niles starting rotation there. Give us your rotation for the National League.
Nationally.
The National League.
Before I go there, I just want to go back to the Gaston thing in '93. I believe he picked 7 players from his own team.
That's right, yeah.
Correct.
And that cost Ricky Henderson a spot. That cost Mickey Tettleton a spot as well. So, that happens, as you said, if you have a problem with it, go win a World Series.
That's exactly what he said.
Yeah, exactly. And then, again, we have to think about also, I believe that there's this rule where if you pitched on or you started on the Sunday before the All-Star game,
that's right,
you're not supposed to pitch in the All-Star game at all.
It's a quiet rule kind of thing, and a lot of teams have, of course, used that to avoid having their pitchers throw that meaningless inning.
And you know what? Remember Tom Henke pitching 3 innings of relief. Was it 87? I'm trying to remember. I think it was the 87 All-Star game, and I know Jimmy Williams was not happy at all about that, for really a meaningless game. I mean, this was before the days before, World Series home field advantage was up for grabs.
They were meaningless games.
They were.
Absolutely. Except to Mike Messina in 1993.
Started warming up. All right, and nationally, I'm going to start with Aaron Nola of the Phillies. He's not maybe a big-name guy, because if you think about the Phillies, you might be thinking Jake Arrieta, but he's actually under 500, but we know wins and losses don't really, count as much. Arrieta's got like a 3.50 ERA, but Aaron Nola has been lights out on the Phillies staff. I believe he's 11-2 with a microscopic ERA. So I would go with him as the number 1 guy. And again, you're gonna have your traditional guys. Kershaw, I mean, even though he's missed a chunk of the season, look at how effective he's been, and not this year. I'm talking about the course of his career, the last few seasons being, up there in Cy Young voting, being ERA leader. I mean, with All-Star games, managers, you're gonna pick guys that have proven that they are big game pitchers. So even though he was on the DL for a bit of time, and he might be picked just because of who he is. Madison Bumgarner, what are his stats this year?
Well, he's just come back.
Yeah,
he only came back a very, very short time. He's not making the All-Star.
No, he's not.
He's not making the All-Star team.
Now you also got to think about as well on the Cubs. We were alluding to earlier, even though the Cubs are we think they're going to win the Central, do you guys see any candidates on the Cubs team.
Lester, that's
Lester.
about it.
Yeah.
Lester.
Yeah, I'd have to say, won't be Darvish.
No, it won't be you, Darvish. I mean, and then you know, Scherzer's going to be there
Exactly,
for sure. You know, and then you might get a few surprises here and there. I mean, Zach Greinke's having another good year, but he's one of those constant guys that are in there. I mean, DeGrom, if he's still with the Mets, you know, he's leading the league in the ERA. Doesn't have the other numbers to show for it, but. You know, it's pitchers, and it is an all-star game. They're only pitching a couple of innings.
Exactly.
It'd be kind of interesting where, once again, you always kind of look at these balances. We're talking about that dearth of first baseman in the American League. Well, when you look at starting pitching, the American League really is, right now, heads and tails above the National League. You got the three guys in Houston.
Exactly. Yeah.
You've got a bunch of guys in Boston on any given night.
Sale.
You know, Chris Sale. I mean, Porcello's won a Cy Young. Price has won a Cy Young. Regular season Cy Young. Kluber.
That's right. Yeah.
You've got
Cy Young winner.
Severino in New York, who has been unbelievable this year. And we haven't even talked about someone like Paxton, who really is lighting it up.
Yeah.
Now, the ERA isn't reflective, really, of how well he's pitched. You know, but I mean, he's up there in Ks. He's moving up there in wins. The American League just has starting pitching nailed down right now.
Yeah, and I believe now alluded to Tom Hankey, you know, back in the 80s going 3 innings in an all-star game. Back then you had closers and starters being all-stars. Now in today's, you know, game you have middle inning relievers, setup also being picked as an all-star. So there are also all these guys to consider as well, because as you said, Lou, you know, the pitcher is going 2 innings, going 1 inning in an all-star game, so you might not you might see, you know, several setup men being selected, you know, by the manager, because, you know, they're trying to, even as it's basically an exhibition game, there's nothing on the line, you still want to go out there and win for your league.
No, I mean, there is something on the line, the World Series home field advantage. That's a pretty big deal. That could be a pretty big deal. We'll cut this segment off right here. When we come back, we're going to talk about the two, let's call them local teams. We're going to focus a little bit more on the Mariners and a little bit more on the Blue Jays once we get back here. You are listening to Vancouver Canadians Game Day on the home of the Canadians, TSN 1040.
High drive. Deep to left. That one's not coming back. Hey, be back. Here's your host, Rob Fay.
Good evening, Lou Filippo sitting in here for Rob Fay, KPW with me, and Niall O'Donohoe. Doing much better on that name with the Vancouver Canadians Game Day today night, eh?
Well, Rob Fay is threatening to call me Niall Smith, so, you know, you're not the only one who's tripped up over it, believe me.
Give you a quick rundown on the Northwest League scoreboard. Eugene leading Boise 3-2 there in the bottom of the 4th. Tri-City up on Spokane 1-0, or Spokane if you prefer. They are in the 3rd. Hillsborough is trailing Salem 3-1 in the 3rd inning, a battle of 13 and 7 teams. And the Canadians and the Everett Aquasox are still at goose eggs early in the game. 1st inning actually just getting on its way there. So let's get back to Major League Baseball here. And, you know, we've mentioned them a few times. And once again, I know I'm someone who never saw this coming, and I certainly don't think it's sustainable, but I mean, you keep doing it and you keep doing it, and yeah, the C's are playing Everett, parent club is the Mariners. Holy smokes, what are the Mariners doing, and how are they sustaining it?
Well, you know, good enough pitching, winning those 1-run games, and that's really been huge for them. And you know what, when a team just gets that winning chemistry, it, you know, things can happen. I
mean, it's got to be chemistry, because they're not getting great pitching. They're getting slightly better than average pitching and slightly better than average hitting, but it's adding up to a bunch of wins.
Well, they're performing at the right time. I mean, I think I'm not sure what the stats are, but I heard recently that it was innings 7, 8, 9. Yeah. That's when they really perform at their best. Yeah. You know, that they're gearing up for fastballs, and this happens to be a good fastball hitting team because, of course, you know, relievers, they'll come out, it used to be a big deal when you used to throw 90 miles an hour. Now now you hardly blink when you hear about 100. Of course, you have, what's his name in St. Louis, Hicks, I believe it is, throwing 105, but he's kind of the exception. But still, I mean, hitting triple digits, not exactly the rare occurrence it used to be. So, but yeah, the Mariners just seem to be able to hit fastballs pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, just getting back to that point a little bit, like I guess 20 years ago, when you have you have one or two guys in a league per league that throws 100. Now you have 3 guys on a team throwing triple digits, so it's insane. But getting back to the late innings, and he's not a household name, but Edwin Diaz, like the Mariners closer, the 24-year-old, just lights out so far this season. And if they have a lead, and you talk about the 1-run games, Edwin Diaz 33 saves this season. I believe he's got well over a strikeout per inning, average. He's not walking any hitters. Tons of strikeouts, just throwing heat. You have to have that kind of guy in the bullpen. And honestly, when the Mariners got Mike Leake, I thought it was not going to work out for them. And he's got an ERA over 4, but he's got 8 wins. It's I believe that's tied with James Paxton for this, the team lead. So League's been doing the job, giving them innings, which is something that, we were talking about the Blue Jays Stars not giving the team innings, but Mike League's, tied with Paxton again for the league lead, for the team lead in innings. You got the guy like Wade LeBlanc we were mentioning several weeks ago, doing his job. A guy like 26-year-old Marco Gonzalez, not a household name, but somehow he's again an 8-game winner on that team. ERA under 4, tons of strikeouts, and again a low walk rate, giving innings. Again, not household names, but they're doing the job. And Felix Hernandez has been up and down, ERA over 5 this season. So it's a good thing, I guess, this year with Felix not having his best season. You have the supporting cast around him for once, giving innings, giving quality innings. Maybe not, over the top, not like the best in terms of the a rotation a la Houston's, but they're getting the job done, winning all these 1-run games, and these pitchers have been doing the job. And we also can't forget Nelson Cruz. I didn't think he was gonna hit that well, hitting over 270, 22 home runs. That's what's happening in Seattle.
But it still doesn't add up. I mean, we're talking about, now we're rattling off the pitchers, okay? 337, 390, 4.5, 5.5. That is not the rotation that quote unquote champions are made of. These guys are doing it, like you said now. I mean, once you get to the 7th inning, they're the opposite of what the Yankees used to be, where it was like 2 relievers and Rivera and the game's over.
The game was over.
In this case, you get to the 7th inning, hey guys, we're just getting started.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I guess it's almost like an NBA game that way. You just wait till the 4th quarter when it rolls around. It seems to work out that way for the Mariners. But you know what? I think the one move you mentioned him, KP, Marco Gonzalez. I know the Mariners got a lot of flack about that deal, especially when they traded away BC boy and Tyler O'Neill. Who's definitely one of the top slugging prospects of the Mariners. But Gonzalez has, he's been a nice addition to that rotation. I think Mike Leake as well. I think that move was really made towards this year. I mean, yeah, I know the Mariners were kind of on the periphery of the wild card chase last year, but I think Jerry DiPoto was kind of looking ahead and thinking that, he might be a nice piece to have in the rotation for 2018, and so far it's worked out.
Well, Leake was a very highly rated prospect, and he did have some pretty decent years with the Reds as well. So he's not someone that comes from no pedigree. So,
going to the American League,
but you could see the potential there, right? Sure. Because these guys don't forget how to pitch. If you got a guy who's actually done it before, there's that possibility. There's a reason why nobody was signing Arrieta, because he stunk out the joint last year. But hey, won a Cy Young a couple of years ago. This guy's got the possibility. And Leake used to be an unbelievably hot commodity a few years ago.
That was a few years ago, right?
Yeah. But it's only a couple of years. Right now, who would you rather have, Hernandez or Leake? I'll take Leake.
Yeah,
I can't argue with the numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I will say though, like these pitchers, these starters for the Mariners, if you look at their numbers again, they're doing like 3 to 1 strikeout to walk ratio,
and that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is, and we can't just we can't overlook that at all, for sure.
I mean, the strikeout rate is very high on that team. Once again, of course, being led by James Paxton. But once you take Paxton out of the equation for what you would consider your classic power pitching numbers, it gets mediocre pretty quick. Nobody else has 90. He's at 145. Nobody else has 90. Now, it's not as bad as the Jays pitching, which is a totally different story.
Yeah.
But the bullpen is definitely hauling the weight here for sure. And we always talk about, well, is it sustainable? Is it sustainable? These starters aren't getting close to 6 either. If they can, pick it up a bit and give that bullpen a bit of a rest, can't believe I'm saying it. Maybe they got a chance.
Well, another name I don't think has come up yet, Wade LeBlanc. I mean, considering he was in the Blue Jays farm system not that long ago, and boy, he'd actually look pretty nice in the Jays rotation these days. But he was just recently signed to a contract extension for 2019. I believe there's option years attached, so he could be a Mariner for 2022. But 4-0 this year, 3.19 ERA. He's a guy who, he throws strikes. He's not going to necessarily blow you away with 100-mile-an-hour stuff, but, he's not walking a lot of hitters, 16 walks in 79 innings and struck out 60, and his whip is pretty decent, 1.15. So he's been another nice underrated pitcher for the Mariners this year.
We've only got a couple minutes here left before our next break. So let's tackle this one question. Things are going really, really well. Robinson Cano is going to be back in just over a month. How much of a leash do you give Cano if the team starts to slide? That's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, because let's face it, these guys are, no questions, they are overachieving. Mm-hmm. But that's because on the field of play, like right now, their biggest star is Nelson Cruz, who's a DH. On the field of play, there is no big name. There is no alpha dog inside the baselines. Is that part of the success?
Maybe it's Ichiro. Maybe the off,
bring him out of retirement.
Yeah, but he's still on the field for pregame. Like he's basically there with the troops for the game. So I don't know. Maybe the Ichiro pixie dust is working. I don't know.
We're just talking in the last hour about moves that have worked out that we didn't think that would. Like the first baseman Ryan Healy that they got from Oakland in the trade in the off season. Third year in the big leagues this year, second on the team in the home runs, 17 right now. He's going to surpass his career high. He's a guy playing first base again. We don't expect to see an unfamiliar name like that doing well at first base. But again, this is kind of an off year in the American League at that position. But he's been hitting the ball hard and hitting the ball well for the Mariners. I mean, maybe he's one of the leaders on that team.
And Mitch Haniger as well. I think that's another huge name. And unfortunately though, tonight he's not playing because of a bruised knee. But and the thing is, the Mariners have been able to weather all these injuries and these setbacks. They had some injury woes to begin the season, of course, with Robinson Cano's suspension. But they've still been able to weather the storm.
Well, maybe it's the Angels' night tonight when they take on the Mariners.
Well, we'll see. I mean, if it's just like the Seas down in Everett. I mean, you got to beat the team that's in front of you, and that's who they've got in front of them. See what they can do. When we come back after this next break, we are going to talk a little bit about the Toronto Blue Jays. Plus, here's your chance to win 4 tickets to go see a Vancouver Canadians baseball game. But they don't come for free. We have a question that you will have to answer. We'll get that after the break. You are listening to Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice, on the home of the Canadians, TSN 1040.
You're listening to Canadians Game Day on TSN 1040.
Home of the Jays, Mariners, and Vancouver Canadians.
Host Rob Fay.
Welcome back to Vancouver Canadians Game Day. Lou Filippo sitting in here for Rob Fay, who's down in Everett, calling a Vancouver Canadians baseball game against the Everett Aqua Sox, home team of the Mariners, who, by the way, are coming up right after us, playing the Angels. So tune in, hang on for that one there. It's the time of the evening that everybody is waiting for. And no, I don't mean we're going off air. I mean, we're giving away tickets. We are giving away tickets, 4 tickets to a Vancouver Canadians baseball game. And hey, folks, believe it or not, that right now, that's probably the hottest ticket in the city, and they've been the hottest tickets for quite a few years. We got a trivia question for you. We're going to talk about Blue Jays and trade possibilities for Josh Donaldson. But he's already been traded twice. Both times he's been traded, he has been traded for either a Canadian-born player or a former Vancouver Canadian. When he was traded from Oakland to the Jays, Franklin Barreto, former Vancouver Canadian,
2014.
and Brett Laurie, Canadian-born player. Now, when he was traded from the Cubs to Oakland, he was traded not only for a Canadian-born player, but a former Vancouver Canadian. We want to know the name of that BC-born player that was traded for Josh Donaldson, Oakland to Chicago. You know the answer. Give us a call at 604-280-1040, toll free 1-844-876-1040 or 1-844-TSN1040. First caller's got the answer. You got 4 tickets to a Vancouver Canadians baseball game.
And some very good news out of Everett. I refreshed the screen. I did a double take. I did a triple take. But just checking out the score now. Vancouver 7. Everett, nothing.
That's obviously a great start there for the C's. Now, you talked about it earlier.
But you know what? But you know what?
It's early, but
it's early, and it's Everett Memorial Stadium.
Yes,
there have been bigger leads that have gone out the window than that. So, but it's a great start.
That's certainly a great start.
But let's not break out the party hats quite yet. But still,
that's not football score, is that?
No,
it's not.
Well, actually, it is. Yeah, well, they got the extra point, but you consider the other games that are going on. We have 7-5 Texas Detroit on our screens here, and Hamilton 7, Saskatchewan 6 in the CFL. So Vancouver's already matched Hamilton, the Tiger Cats, for offense. So that's good.
Yeah, football game was in Miami where Washington beat the Marlins 14-12, which may actually outpace this football game, although someone is running with the ball. Yeah. Back to the Blue Jays and back to, once again, the topic. Of course, the reason I brought up Josh Donaldson, and we've gone through this so many times, and it's kind of like every week it's like we're waiting for him to come back, waiting for him to come back. And I know we brought up the name J. Happ earlier.
Yeah.
And the only reason I bring up J. Happ's name is Marco Estrada walked off the mound the other day with hip soreness.
Hip soreness, well, we heard hip soreness and then something to do with the butt.
Yeah,
yeah.
At what point do you cut your losses and say, okay, we've now got one guy with value, real value, okay? Mm-hmm. We got one guy with real value. When do you cut your losses and say, okay, we're going to have to move him before something happens to him, and then we have nothing to move?
It's just been unbelievable. The lack of health in the starting rotation. Jaime Garcia out. Marcus Stroman was out. And you know what? Actually, there's a story on TSN.ca today. Steve Phillips believing that there might still be something physically wrong with Marcus Stroman, considering how he struggled last night against the New York Mets. So, where there's smoke, there's fire. I think he may be onto something there. And he knows the game. Former general manager. There might be very well something to that. Garcia Sanchez, of course, now with that finger contusion, don't know when he's going to be back. So, you're looking at J. Happ right now, and it's like you feel like you got to put him in bubble wrap.
Before it gets too late, we're just going to take a break here for a second. We do have a winner for our tickets, and that winner is
John Jordan from Vancouver, the very first caller.
And he knew the answer was Rich Harden. Vancouver Canadians circa the year 2000, and of course, a native of BC. Traded for Josh Donaldson when Josh Donaldson was hitting .212 as a catcher in the Cubs system. He was drafted as a catcher. And believe it, that was actually our move of the week when they got traded back on Vancouver Canadians Game Day. Other trade targets for the Blue Jays?
Again, you have a guy like Curtis Grandison.
Now, what can he get you though?
Well, he's going to be moved. What can you get for him? Good question. Like you're not going to get a major league player back, but you're going to get perhaps like a AA player, maybe. But if you're going to start trading assets, he's the one that makes sense. I mean, Rob was on, in the last hour, and again saying like, if you do trade J.A. Happ, your best pitcher so far this season, what message are you giving to the fan base, and also what message are you giving to the players within that locker room? Because I'm sure that both of you guys have, spoken to former players or even players in general. Like once your top guy or some of your best players are traded, the mood in the clubhouse is depressing, and it sends a wrong message to the rest of the team. Maybe they come out and play the next game, they're not so excited, and it does have an impact on the morale of the team. And conversely, if you have a team where guys are acquired, and that shows the players, hey, management cares about winning. Management has our back. We're gonna go out and play extra hard. We're gonna, that kind of thing does happen. And I do agree with Rob's point in the last hour, saying, if you do want to trade guys, trading away J.A. Happ might bring him some value because he's a left-hander. He could be a solid third starter for a playoff-bound team. But again, you're sending a wrong message to the fan base. So I say status quo.
Like 18 games below is the wrong message. Now you can get the last word here.
I think the message has been sent, and it's not been a good one as far as Blue Jays fans are concerned. Maybe you look at the bullpen. Tyler Clippard, he might have some value. Sung-Hwan Oh, John Axford. Axford's done better than I honestly thought he would do this year. Teams always need help in the bullpen.
Exactly,
so that you're not going to get the greatest prospect in the world, but you might get maybe perhaps a team's top 20, top 30 type prospect.
And traditionally, those are the types of guys that do get moved at the deadline.
Yeah.
Maybe you get a 312 single A hitting catcher. 212 single A hitting catcher, and he eventually becomes the MVP of the American League. It's always interesting. Now, I've been a Jay fan for so long, and obviously it's not fun to watch this happening. And Vancouver Canuck fans can certainly relate in terms of what they've gone through the last few years, where it's kind of you're trying to hang on, where it's become very obvious that you need to do something before it's too late. And I know with the Jays, they lost Encarnacion for nothing. They lost Batista for nothing. Tulowitzki is basically untradeable. Donaldson is trending that way. Like, let's not kid ourselves. There's an outside chance we may not see him this year because he keeps getting hurt. And as a player, he is trying to come back because he is playing for a contract. So he's not sitting there dogging it, saying, okay, let me just get through this season. I'll worry about it next year. No, because he's going to cost himself millions of dollars. And that's how you just keep getting yourself hurt again.
Who might be, and I know we're running up against the clock here, maybe Kendrys Morales. He has been hitting a little bit better. Sure, you're going to have to eat an awful lot of salary, but you might still be able to get something. So, and I think that's, I think if you were to tell us that back in April, I think we'd be pretty happy with that.
National League teams might, be interested in a pinch hitter like him. He could be moved.
Yeah, Morales, he's definitely doing much better than he was. Russell Martin, if he can if he can get himself up to 220, he has value to teams like Houston. Like Max Stassi, he's not the guy you want running your staff in the playoffs, or any team that's got a big pitching staff. He's got some value if he can get there.
Playoff experience.
And that's kind of the problem that we're going to have with the Blue Jays here is we're looking at how they can help other teams instead of how they can help themselves.
That's right.
And meanwhile, you've got
Feels
Seattle.
like Jerry Maguire. Help me, help you.
Help me. That's going to be it for us tonight. Thank you all for listening. You've been listening to Vancouver Canadians Game Day, brought to you by Booster Juice on the home of the Canadians, TSN 1040.
This TSN 1040 podcast is powered by Metro Ford. It's hard to beat a Metro Ford deal in Fort Coquitlam and online at metromotors.com.